right. Hello and welcome to the Coaching Conversation podcast. Today, I am really excited to have with me here Bryan Hart. He is a master certified coach. To give a perspective on that, MCC or an ICF credentialed MCC usually have 2,500 hours plus a lot of training. Bryan, I believe you have over 5,000 hours of coaching. That's not including all the training and mentoring that you've done over the years. So I'm really happy to have this conversation with you. Welcome.
Yeah, thank you, Salah. I've been a coach for 15 years and a coach trainer for about a decade, and it's been a joy to do both. I find the whole field has been so fun to play in and work in, and I need to update my hours. I know 5,000 hours probably not completely accurate.
Yeah.
It's more than that somewhere. I got to get my
Right.
log updated, as many of us
Yeah.
will say. So
It's hard to keep track of the hours as because as coaches I know we try to coach, but at the same time we have to also maintain some documentation if we want to advance in the profession, especially if you're on that ICF path. I usually start with the question of what inspired you to get into this line of work, and in this case, coaching. What is something that you want to share about how you came into this work?
yeah, so started out working with young adult programs, helping them prepare for college, helping them prepare for career, financial literacy classes more locally. And that all bled into this experience where I was reaching out to different organizations and ended up getting picked up by um, an academic coaching and consulting firm that had ICF coaches invested, embedded in it. They trained me up unofficially. And then through that experience, I was churning out a lot of hours of coaching, but I wasn't really accredited yet. Um, I went on to get my certification and all that kind of stuff. But through that whole experience, it's all in a way just continued to be about helping young adults prepare for life and helping people thrive overall. I
Mm.
mean, and I'm sure we'll kind of talk about it later, but ultimately, I just want to see a coaching experience for every professional, and especially every high schooler in the world. And so the long game is that, but it started out as fascination and a love for helping young adults prepare, and then getting into the coaching space. I could see how the process of coaching helped them not just hear about how to prepare for life, but to choose how to prepare for life
Mm.
for themselves, to take more ownership of their own story instead of telling them what their story should be. And so, fell in love
Yeah.
with it from there.
Yeah. Yeah, I think access to coaching, I think that's something that probably 10 plus years ago, we didn't have until a lot of the platforms. I don't know if you remember, we met through BetterUp, which is a coaching
Hmm.
platform that has been growing rapidly. A lot of the um, individuals or members who want coaching, there's a lot of tools and platforms now that they can access to get coaching versus in the past where you only have to be an executive or sort of a senior
Yeah.
leader to be able to get a coach or help work with a coach.
Yeah. That was my transition. Once I earned my credential, I was able to be picked up by BetterUp and got much more acclimated to. I went through some training to help me get there, but going into corporate coaching, moving into executive coaching and leadership development coaching, it's fascinating to see how those same skills that helped a 14-year-old to 24-year-old 4-year-old prepare for college and stuff, those same skills applied to someone at the C level who's looking to retire soon, and a new director or someone pursuing that level or beyond. And so I'm very thankful for that early experience with BetterUp. I've been with them as coach assessor, or like helping with assessing coach performance and evaluating it, and coach development in a variety of capacities. And that's how we met too. So
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah. I know it's something that I hear a lot. Maybe we can start with a couple of questions around like coaching, because there is still sort of a confusion maybe or a lack of clarity around what coaching is. A lot of times people think coaching is, sort of a therapy, or therapy and coaching or overlap in some ways. So what is coaching? If you were to
Yeah.
define it, or kind of distill it down to someone who doesn't know what coaching is, what would it be?
Yeah, and it's interesting because whenever we're having a first conversation with someone, we almost want to tune how we describe coaching to the experience of the person. But if we were in our first coaching session, the way I would describe it oftentimes is that coaching is a thought partnership where I'm coming alongside you, and well, it's not therapy where we're looking at healing wounds, mental and emotional wounds, even though we might use some of the same skills. It's not mentoring or consulting where I'm informing your decisions, your life, your goals with a little bit more of a hands-on approach. Although a lot of mentors and consultants use coaching skills. Coaching is the ability to lean into stimulating thought, awareness, strategic thinking in the other person as a almost like a second mind, a second brain, and a second pair of eyes on the person's life. So I can go into more of like a tactical spin of it or a more transformational spin, and I'll determine that in a first session as I'm describing things to the individual. On a tactical spin, the coach is there to help a person think more thoroughly about the root causes of things and why things, why a decision matter, why a goal matters, and how that motivation impacts their commitment to follow through, and what options they see, what possibilities they see, so that they are more successful with whatever goals they set for themselves, and also offer some accountability and support throughout that process. We can use tools and resources to help them see more and learn some things along the way. But a more transformational way of describing coaching for someone who might be more open to the process is that I'm here to help you hear yourself, to see yourself, to think more about how what you're wanting to accomplish is tied to your identity and those parts of yourself that might be getting in the way that you need to address, not from a therapeutic standpoint, but
Mhm.
just to see all of you as part of the journey that you're on. And as a coach, I'm not invested in getting you to where I want you to go. I'm here to help you get where you want to go. So I'll be using silence, open questions, challenging you with your own language to think thoroughly about whatever you're wanting to think about. So yeah, the way we describe coaching is kind of tied to the experience of the person.
Mhm.
But yeah, I'm rambling too much. I'll pass it back to you, Sloan.
No, that's good to have this distinction, because a lot of times there is some overlap, as you mentioned, between the skills that are used in coaching or therapy, but they look at different, things. Like coaching has a different lens than therapy, and a lot of times I hear people using the metaphor of sports as a sports coach, but I don't know if that's align with the coaching. There seems to be, it's still kind of like in a way that the coach challenged the team members and
Mhm.
helped them grow and develop, provide feedback or ask questions to engage or raise awareness. So is that, do you see that as
Yeah.
sort of a good metaphor in?
Yeah. If I see any sports balls behind my behind my client when I get on the call with them, I often will, or if they say their experiences with sports coaching, then I'll often explain that, this kind of coaching is maybe a little bit more similar to professional coaching or Olympian coaching, where I might be experienced with some of the work that you're doing, but I see you as someone who is more capable than me in your position, someone who is able to achieve far more than me as an expert in your specific role, your specific team, your specific company culture. And so it's not like elementary school, primary school, secondary school, high school coaching where I'm teaching you how to do the sport, teaching you how to do your job, telling you how to do it better. Instead, I'm helping you do what you know you can do more effectively. And of course, there's going to be some perspective I can share, some stories I can share of others, and tools and resources. But anything that a coach offers always needs to be recontextualized into the life of the person they're working with, because again, they're the Olympian in the field, and I'm here to support them getting their gold medal or whatever we want to carry that forward.
Right. Yeah, I think taking this a little bit more or building on this, before we go into the coach's journey, how coaches can learn and develop and grow in that space. Some of the things that I've been thinking about a lot, and it actually came uh, when I was going on my coaching journey, and one of the mentor coaches I worked with, or coaching supervisors who help in the process, she told me people don't really care about coaching per se. They care about their problems and how coaching can help them, develop or become a better version of themselves so that they can solve their own problems. I want to take a minute here to talk about like what kind of topics that usually come up in coaching that people might be exploring or come to the coaching to explore.
Here's my opinion, and I haven't changed it in the past 5, 6 years, that all clients come with one of five agendas. And let's see if I can name them off correctly. General self awareness and understanding the self, whether it's their strengths and their identity or their, just general learning about the self. Strategic thinking, decision making would be the second one. Goal setting, prospection, habit formation, behavior change, or communication relationships.
Hmm.
Whether we're working with someone who is in academic coaching at a young age, executive coaching at the very top, or health and well-being coaching, even in all of those fields, you'll tend to see all five of those, because a person who's coming in wanting to work on healthy eating habits, one session they might be talking about their habits more directly. In the second session, they might be talking about the conversations they need to have in order to make those things come to life in their context.
Hmm.
So those are generally the five things. Now, some clients bring in topics that, like, maybe they're working on one of those and they need to go deeper into a space that might be better served by therapy. But oftentimes when we're in that coaching space, the person's wanting to grow in any of those five areas. And so having some familiarity about how coaching sessions work around those five topics, having tools and resources about those five topics can be helpful. At the end of the day, though, coaching works primarily because we're adapting whatever our expectations are and the coaching process to the way the client speaks, the words they use, the way they see the world, their own experience and context. So it almost doesn't matter what the client brings. It matters that the coach is able to adapt and to help the person feel like they're both seen, but also able to think more effectively. Because at the end, like you said, at the end of the day, the coach, the client doesn't care if you are the best coach in the world in terms of what numerical scoring we might offer in terms of coach training. They care if their problem gets solved. But so often when a coach just tries to solve the problem for the client, the real deeper stuff that needs to be addressed in order to solve the problem isn't being addressed. And it's just a quick fix. So
Hmm.
there's a
Yeah,
lot of depth to coaching in that way.
that's how I observe the topics, or if I were to add to the two areas that I see in coaching, is the client usually show up with some external things that are happening to them, or and coaching may explore, or most of the time it explores not just the external but the internal, right? Because that's
Hmm.
that's how a person grows, is when they become self-aware of the limitations and the constraints, and they may be true, but sometimes they are self-imposed.
Yeah.
That's how coaching can help raise that kind of awareness.
I think with coaching, we'll see such a variety of agenda topics that, the more you coach, the more you see that even though there's that variety and every client's going to be different, every client's going to bring some slightly different flavor. at- We're all, we have some very interesting similarities across cultures, across the world, and those deeper needs of understanding ourselves, understanding what to do with feedback or external prompts, decision making, looking into our future and trying to figure out what we're doing with this life. These are baked in needs, and so often with the cultures that we might find ourselves in, it's just about go go go, solve the problem, get things done. But those individuals who are able to intentionally slow things down and think not only at this level but at these levels for themselves and for others, are able to have a real competitive advantage. It's this idea of slow down to speed things up. Um, so again, with the idea of describing coaching, makes me think. I can't remember what coach, football coach, American football coach. I think it might have been Tony Dungy when he took over the Florida team, which Buccaneers. He wasn't known for doing amazing plays, or he wasn't known for doing anything special. He was known for helping the team do the basic things more effectively
Mm.
and just being the best with those basic things. And coaching is in some ways like that. We're not doing anything special. We're helping people address those deep inner needs by doing the basic things of hearing them, helping them think, helping them, slow down just a little bit more effectively. It's in some ways really exciting. In other ways, it's kind of boring to describe what coaches actually do. We're just helping people be more human. It's kind of
Yeah.
odd to say, but
I think you're pointing to where I want to go next, which is, when I first saw coaching as part of, again, of my journey, was it was like magic, and it seemed, like you said, very boring, very simple. How hard can it be to ask a bunch of
yeah,
questions and listen and provide silence or space for the person to explore and think? It might seem simple and boring, but it's anything but
yeah,
when someone new or tried to do it or to coach using these skills. It's not easy. It takes a lot
yeah,
of practice. And I know you mentor a lot of coaches and you've helped a lot of new coaches and even professional coaches refine their skills. So, what are some basic, I guess, skills or foundational skills that someone can build on as a new coach or someone who's maybe interested to become a coach?
yeah. I would say, I don't know, this little diagram I was just using for a continuing education class would probably represent this pretty well. And we have some key skills like how we set up an agenda, how we set up a coaching relationship or engagement. Then we have the idea of with an individual coaching session, what we're doing to set the stage, plan out what we'll focus on. The key skills, though, really come down to these three. Again, to use that analogy of sports, it's not the super special moves that we're doing that matter. It's more of the ability to do these basic things more effectively. So having a little bit of space, offering just a little bit of pause. There's like 3 second or 4 second pause before the next question, because so often in our conversations, we're just go, go, go with the next response. And coaching provides just that little bit of breath. And then the idea of offering open and concise questions, not staying on the stage too long, but asking a question that allows the person to think deeply about what they're talking about. And For them to fill in the gaps, to have a simple question that especially uses their words. And out of everything, this is the big one. Whether it's a coach that's just getting started in the field or the MCC, Master Certified Coach, your ability to leverage client language within a question or within a reflection is one of the most important aspects of what makes coaching effective. If we have all the most powerful questions in our pocket, but we don't tune those questions to the way our client speaks, then we're mainly just, I don't know, we're trying to get them to line up with the way we think, and we're going to miss out on their ability to think for themselves. So when we offer that space, offer meaningful close or meaningful questions that are open, bringing in meaningful client language, it tends to help a client slow down, think more thoroughly about the way they are seeing themselves in their world. And then through that insight that they gain by slowing down, they're able to more clearly see what action they need to take, what the resolution might be to the challenge they're facing, or what decision they need to make. There's still definitely structure,
Hmm.
but the ability to adjust our communication with those three aspects: space, open questions or reflections, and client language are the key behaviors.
I like the balance of those three things because I, again, like relate to my own journey and growth in this space. In the beginning, I was more focused on open questions. I really like questions.
Hmm.
I'm very curious, so I like to ask a lot of open-ended questions. And so I noticed that, like you said, asking open-ended questions that may help in some respect, but then it directs the attention of the client or the person who's in the coaching space, and so you put too much emphasis on the coaching, on the open questions. It seems to take the client somewhere where they may not want to go. So the balancing that with the language of the client is very insightful, is very deep. I know in coaching there's three foundational skills that I usually bring up, like the open questions, the listening, acknowledgement, or encouraging the person to open up and discover things as they go. I think you have also a deeper in terms of the listening, like the language of the client. I think one of the things that I learned from you is this idea of like deep listening and using the language of the client, because sometimes they don't really hear themselves, and
Yeah.
repeating that their own words or their language can open up their awareness a lot more than asking open-ended questions in some ways.
Well, one thing I like to say is there's not necessarily too much right and wrong in the coaching space. It's more everything has a force. If I ask a closed question, it has a sharper force than an open question. And it also has a effect of narrowing down the client's responses. So it's not necessarily a bad thing, but if we're doing, for instance, like 10 closed questions in a row, we would expect that the client's giving us less and less with each response. So similarly, using client language or the language that we use in our reflections and questions will just have a force to it. So if I'm asking a template question like, what makes this topic important to you today? It's not necessarily a bad question, but it won't have as much oomph or connection to what the client's sharing. And if the client says that, I ask what's on your mind today, and they say, I've got this meeting that's coming up next weekend or next week on Friday. It's going to be a train wreck. And I don't know, almost don't even know who I can trust in this meeting where we're going to have different department heads show up and everyone's going to be kind of playing politics. And I really need to get my team to have the representation, the support, the resources they need. So if we can talk about that, that would be great. Get all of that. And I say, what makes this topic important to you today? It almost feels like I'm doing a thing to you instead of being with you.
Mm,
But if I were to say, so what's making this such a disaster? Not necessarily a bad thing. It's, bringing in something of what the
mhm,
client's talking about. But I also just translated train wreck to disaster unnecessarily. Instead, we could say, yeah, what's making this meeting something where it's both going to be a train wreck where everyone's still playing politics? Like, yeah, what's all this about? Helping the client just hear themselves with the same kind of question. I mean, there's loads of other questions we could ask, but
mhm,
even just with that example, we can bring in the language of the client to make it spiced up to the way the client's to the flavor palette of the client,
mm,
or it creates more resonance with the client. If we create a question that has different language than the way the client's talking, we should naturally expect that that creates dissonance. So if I ask that same question, what about this meeting is going to be hard when everyone's trying to network and advocate for their needs? That's not, it's kind of what the client's saying, but there's a bit of a dissonance there because it's not
mhm,
the way the client's communicating. But if I use that same question that I said earlier, what's behind this meeting that's a train wreck where everyone's playing politics, or what's making it that kind of meeting? The client's going to hear their own mental model reflected back to them, and it
mhm,
makes their thinking a little bit faster, a little bit more connected. And that's one of the things that makes coaching effective is that we aren't translating their words. We're just helping them see themselves. That
mhm.
goes back to the idea of it's kind of boring because I'm not doing some huge magic trick with the question.
Yeah.
It's almost like this basic algebra equation
Mm,
of that question is essentially like significance plus client language
mm,
as the algebra of that question. But to do that well in the moment 3 seconds after the client's done speaking. It seems boring to say, but there's so much more depth to that process. And where else does a person go to have a conversation about vulnerable, uncomfortable things that they need to figure out in a space where the instant response isn't like, oh, let me give this solution to you. Have you thought about this suggestion? It's such a rare experience to have someone just hear you and help you think.
I felt the difference in the question, how it landed, the one where you just ask after the client said, here's what I want to talk about, and then you ask, what's important about this? What's important to you about this? And I felt like I'm okay, that's sort of like a shift
Yeah.
and then the other question I felt, even though, this is I'm an observer, or at least I'm hearing this as a story, I felt more pulled into this experience. Like, okay, yeah, that's what I said. I said train wreck. I said politics. So these words, I used these words. So now I'm more engaged. I'm more attuned with the coaching experience. I think a lot of times, again, when I'm thinking about the I mentor some of the coaches, the candidates who want to progress to the ECC, or from non-credential coach to an ECC. And a lot of time when I watch the recording or I hear them, they're thinking about the next question to ask, and they miss out on this deep listening, or the language that the client used, and they either use something else, or they ask a question that, completely shifts in a different direction.
Yeah. And it's over time. And there's a whole journey of coaching. When you get started, you need those training wheel questions. When I started, I had a list of, I think, 400 questions on multiple sheets of paper. And I had a little flip phone talking to my students. And I was like looking at my questions, trying to figure out how to get them to work. Over time, those like those questions that were essentially a crutch, they eventually get in the way. And when listening to that little miniature story, without processing everything or knowing all the details, we just see this train where people are playing politics on the train, and we're like, oh, that seems weird. That seems strange. I wonder what's going on there. And so eventually the coach begins to say, hey, here are the pieces of language. What's a natural question that those pieces naturally bring together? And we just have a curiosity that helps the client think about that language from a few different angles. So there's, again, I was saying algebra, alchemy. We're trained to think of the major themes of deeper thinking, learning, action, unpacking, selecting, outside of the self, inside the self. There's all these themes, and then we take that theme, combine it with a piece of language, and we put those together to create the question instead of looking at my list of 400 for the fitting one. So yeah, it's simple and extremely, I don't want to say hard, extremely hard to master, but it takes a long time to master. It's a lot of behavior change and developing skills that we don't get to practice very often outside some everyday conversations.
I think the journey as the progression from the first credential, or maybe the ACC, Associate Certified Coach, to the PCC, Professional Certified Coach, to the MCC, there's a lot of gap in terms of the hours required to master these conversations or coaching skills. What have you noticed as far as the difference between someone who's the early stage of their journey to the ICF, the MCC credential? Maybe how did you see it as starting out versus now?
I might share another slide. I know this is a slide that I tend to share. It's funny because like the deep listening thing and this thing were pieces that I was putting together based on years of mentor coaching and feedback conversations with coaches and assessing coaches. And at the same time, Better Up, their research team was finding these two aspects were the two aspects they were finding to have the biggest outcome or impact on outcomes. And so the one is the deep listening, and the other is the ability for the coach to adapt to the needs of the client.
Mm.
But the way I'd see the coach journey with earning their credentials is I kind of figure it this way. that when we begin the process, we're a little bit outside of coaching. We're a little bit more in the advice giving hat or the telling and diagnosing consultative hats, where those aren't necessarily bad, but if we're trying to coach and we're trying to just lean into the coaching process, coach training helps us stretch those muscles a little bit more. When we get done with the coach training, we're able to tune our range to serve sometimes a little bit more transactional sessions and somewhat transformational sessions. And as we earn our credentials, it's not like I earned my ACC and then I am a better coach and then I'm a really good coach and all that other stuff wasn't very good. Instead, the coach is just expanding this range.
Mhm.
And that range is when a client isn't even sure where to begin. They feel very stuck. They're very new to coaching. They're not feeling very safe in the coaching experience. They're in a very big I don't know state. They might appreciate a little bit closer to a transactional approach, not fully. We don't want to just do transactional, but we might lean towards their needs a little bit more. We might give a bit more guidance and directiveness towards options to choose from and tools and resources to help them over time become more comfortable with the coaching process. And then for those clients who've had a lot of coaching, maybe the executives who've been coached for quite a few years, maybe we're focused on more MCC style coaching, which is high pressure, low comfort on the client, a lot of space, very strong use of client language, consistently having the client lead the session. But not every client needs that. Like if I'm working with someone on Better Up or in a company and they think I'm there to spy on them and get them fired or something like that, I'm not going to use a pure MCC approach. So
Mhm.
the idea of coach training from the very beginning is getting these initial skills and becoming more comfortable with them. So over time, we can lean further into longer silences, trim things down to very concise questions, slow down our thinking to where we can just receive information from the client so we can hear train wreck, plain politics, I don't even know, and all those pieces of language that we can reflect back in reflections and questions. And it takes time. It sounds simple, but there's almost this letting go of ourselves and our autopilot, training that to make room for the clients, for them to do more heavy lifting. So that's what I've seen is like the journey
Mhm.
of coaching, coach development is expanding our range instead of like, oh, you're doing it all wrong. We got to fix that. So,
Yeah. It almost sounds like
yeah.
the hero's journey in some respect. It's
Exactly.
like
Yeah.
you overcome a challenge, and with that challenge, you grew a little more. And then
Yeah.
maybe you have a bigger challenge and you grew a little bit more. And then over time, you sort of have these accumulated challenges give you a lot more resilience or dexterity or robustness to be able to withstand any context or the context within the coaching,
Yeah.
depending on the situation that you're in.
Unfortunately, the villain in the story feels like it's for my students is me. I'm the little devil on their shoulder saying, "Oh, that was a closed question." But they
um,
they grow through the process, and it's
yeah,
not about doing it right. It's
yeah,
yeah, growing to the next challenge. Yeah,
yeah. And that's another dimension here, or at least the context. There's the what role are you play in the scenario? Like if you're a mentor coach and you're helping coaches grow, then there's a different approach versus
yeah,
if you're with a client, that's a different role. So the role of the mentor coach
hmm,
helping, even though in essence you're helping both in their growth, but
yeah,
the what how you apply the skills are different.
hmm. And there's a lot of attention right now on mentor coaching with ICF. They're updating the requirements, making it more developmental, which is really good.
Mhm.
Mentor coaching sometimes can come across as just like correcting small behaviors, but what mentor coaching should be about is helping a person see themselves in their performance and just be a little bit curious about it. I know that I sometimes share my data-driven approach to mentor coaching, and the idea there is I'm this outsider to the coach I'm working with. And while if I were in their shoes, I would have asked a totally different question. I'm not them. So I need to be very careful of trying to get them to be more like me and
Mhm.
help them to consider, okay, if that was your intuition in the moment, how might you have strengthened that intuition, not disregard the intuition? And so mentor coaching, that's just the International Coaching Federation's language for feedback conversations. They should be feedback not only on the coach behaviors, but what's driving those behaviors and how the identity of the coach is playing the role it is in an individual coaching session. So, out of all the things I do in the field, probably mentor coaching is my favorite. I did a 2 hour continuing education class. What was it? I did group mentor coaching, took a break, 2 hour continuing education class, another mentor coaching session. Now I get to talk to you, and it's been a good day.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
really fun.
I think this is one of the, the reason that helping others or helping others grow, it sort of has a leadership aspect to it as well, because, you're growing and you're helping others grow. That's usually what leaders do. They grow other people, and it is fulfilling to see someone who maybe started out with, the skills were not there, or they had taken their skills to that next level. And I know you use more data-driven approaches to evaluating these skills. So I'm curious to hear more about that,
Yeah.
because I know coaching can be a little hard to measure
Mhm.
in terms of skills. And even if we go into the value of coaching with clients, that's a different thing. But measuring the coaching skills, let's talk about that first. How did you find a way to measure or tweak the data, or use a data driven
Mhm.
approach?
Yeah. So when I started out coach training, I was just filling a gap, and I was struggling with how subjective the whole process felt, with as I looked at the ICF's competencies, and I was like, oof, how do you measure these? Because I like analyzing things just naturally. And so I built this like self-study assessment 10 years ago, and it's evolved into my torture device I've used ever since for all the coaches I've served. Um, but what it did was it took the coaching session and began to measure certain behaviors and how they showed up over time in a coaching session. Let me see. These are the slides I was using. It was the continuing education course was on mentor coaching, so I've got another slide deck. But in mentor coaching, the mentor coach has these like four things going on in their engine under the hood. You have the thoughts of, ooh, if I were in their shoes, I would have done X. But like I was saying earlier, that's something that we usually try to set aside a little bit, in favor of just trying to serve the client, or serve the coach. Then you have the ICF's competencies, these ideas of the best practices in the field.
Mhm.
You also have the sense of just what happened, no judgment, just the raw data of what was going on in the session. And then the inner experience of the client that might have been driving, the inner experience of the coach that might have been driving those behaviors represented by the raw data. So, what this this is what that spreadsheet looks like, that I've used over the years, and there's different versions of it. There will be a transcript on the left hand side with the coaches' exchanges, all the coaches' lines in the session, and we score those against, in this case, 17 different dimensions. And here, let's see, I'm going to resize this a little bit. But you have things like how open and concise the questions are, how spacious the session is,
Mhm.
the coach is using client language, all that kind of stuff, and how well the coach is checking in or following the client over time. And without knowing much of what's going on here, we just see there's some greens, some goods in here. And then the data shifts. Spaciousness goes down overall. The questions become consistently more messy, closed or double. The client language goes down. And sometimes when having this kind of assessment, also the advice giving shows up, and it doesn't in this case, but the questions become more focused on the situation, the information, is less focused on the person. So let's just say this is the assessment that you received in mentor coaching. The goal here is not to say there's anything like any kind of judgment. These are just the data points. These moments had more silence, had less silence than these moments. This was more concise open question. This is a closed question down here. And as we listen, yeah, these are really powerful combinations of client language, really meaningful moments of using client language versus here where it's a little bit more tactical. In the mentor coaching, we're like measuring the performance of the coach, and yet it's not just about flicking the switch on to a better performance, like, oh, just do more open questions.
Mm,
Instead, it's just the data is telling a story. So we ask what might have been behind that shift, what was going on inside the coach that might have led to that data shifting. And it's through that the coach is able to consider alternative options, what skills they most need to develop, and also what part of themselves they might need to address. Whether it's their need, they're like really driven to help people, but because of that drive, when they're running out of time, they start taking over the session. Because
mm,
if the client's not helped the way they want them to be helped, they begin to rush things, and because of that, sometimes it slows down the ability for the client to help themselves. As an example, or
mm.
perfectionism. I'm asking you 4 questions in a row because I don't want the question to be bad. I want it to be the right question. But now I've just given you a jumble of questions.
Right.
And so there's
Yeah.
sometimes that inner self that's exposed by the data that we work on together.
It's interesting how the coach and I've experienced this as I coach clients. I also grow in the process as part of the
Yeah.
coaching. So it's not just like you're like as a coach helping the client or helping others grow, but in the process you're also growing and as you showed that illustration of the range start to widen, but it helps to have the way that you explain like these are almost like steps. You still need these steps to get to the next level, and then the next level. It's not like you can discard things that you've done in the past because you that's how you got to this point where you are. I think that's a good way because a lot of times the coaches or I mean new coaches and even senior coaches or professional coaches who've been doing this for a while, they may not see the like the data driven approach. It's sort of like very subjective or not really driven by data that can inform where I need to focus and grow in that area. So that's a good way to measure. So what about like the value as far as the coaching? Is there a way to measure that, or is that something that because that's also another area of coaching that is very it's maybe qualitative, or I don't know if there's a way to measure. Here's a session that
Yeah. Yeah. It's one of those challenges where when I'm wearing my mentor coaching hat or assessor hat, I half joke that I don't care whose life you changed. Look at that closed question. So to give objective feedback, we almost have to set aside the life transformation that's happening in the client's life because
Mm,
sometimes the client's just extra ready for change and the coach is asking objectively messy questions and not using client language, but the client's really engaged.
mm,
So this has been a conundrum in the coaching field for quite some time that, how do we measure the effectiveness of coaching's behaviors at scale? And I think Better Up, the reason I joined them is their ability to cultivate data at de-identified aggregate data on outcomes, and they've got some good outcomes from coaching. And like I said, they found the things I was finding: deep listening, adaptability of the coach to be some of the biggest drivers to coach performance and client outcomes. But the challenge is the control, meaning whenever we're looking at that data in any organization, how do we know the coach is consistent with those behaviors when we have a box of 100 coaches and 1,000 clients?
mm,
Because the whole experience is very adaptable to each individual client. That's, I think, where we will continue to go with the research in the coaching field, where in order for us to make the best cases for bringing coaching to every high schooler in the world, every professional in the world, we need data that is repeatable and a consistency of approach that is an adaptable approach. So that's one of the reasons I went from coaching to coach development. I wanted to work on the control, the idea of the consistent behaviors of that adaptable coaching approach.
Mm.
So, work in progress. I think there's been so much great research over the years on the effectiveness of coaching, but there's more to be done, especially in terms of how well the coach is doing, plus the outcomes of the client at scale. So,
Mm.
to be continued, I suppose,
Yeah.
Nathan.
Yeah, maybe that's a part two of this podcast.
Yeah,
So that we've talked about coach's journey, like, how coaches grow over time and sort of that range, and that was very helpful in terms of the illustration, because a lot of times, as you mentioned, people think, or coaches think, that they now the ACC, now the PCC, now MCC, they don't think of it as that range that can grow over time. And then we talk about refining the coaching skills with the data and evaluating the skills. What are something that you want to share or leave the people who are watching or listening to this with, in terms of coaching, improving their skills or refining their skills to take it to that next level? Obviously, ICF credentialing can help in that space, because you have to follow this rigorous process to become credentialed. But in general, what would be a good place to start?
I think that looking at ICF in general, going to the ICF website to get a sense of coaching, there's a lot of good articles and explanations there. A somewhat, I don't know, shameless plug. My policy is to make coach training accessible. So all of my materials for my entire year-long program are free and accessible online. So that might be just a space to go.
Mm.
Um, but you can also go to, any other coach training program will tend to have some of their content online and explanations of coaching, sometimes like trials of the beta testing of their coach training experience. Ultimately, I do think the best starting point is to begin with the coach training, a level 1-2 program. That's a great starting point, because that's when you know that you want to build these skills, that's going to build the foundation and around practice.
Mm.
Again, all of my content's free online, because you could talk about and technically like study all you want when it comes to the coaching skills and
Yeah.
behaviors, but it's totally different than actually doing it. It'd be like reading books about going to the gym versus
Right.
going to the gym.
Yeah.
And so coach training is really about getting your feet wet with the actual coaching process. So those are some ideas.
I like the analogy of going to the gym. I usually
Yeah.
use learning how to ride a bike by reading a book about riding a bike.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But it's the same idea. The practice is what helps the coaches expand that range. It's not reading about a framework or a book. Thank you for making this available online to people to learn, at least to get just their feet wet about what coaching is and
Yeah.
what goes into it. What's something that you want to leave us with? I know you have, we can put the contact information. People can
Yeah.
check the website or the
I'll say
resource.
it's a bad time for marketing because
Yeah.
I'm in a rebranding from corporate sponsored coach training or corporate coach training to Raven coach training. And so if you see either, they're both me. You can just look Coach Bryan Hart up on LinkedIn. You'll find me. But yeah, ultimately, I think my goal is to make coach training more accessible, coaching more accessible. It's actually the idea of the mythology of the Alaska Native Raven mythology. It's that the the raven stole the stars, moon, and then sun and made them more accessible to the world to bring the light to the world. And that's the hope with coach training, and also just what we get to do with coaching. I think overall, when you are invested as a coach, you're helping people see the light, like illuminate their thinking and their way forward with their own decision making, helping them own their own story. I just thank everyone who's listening who is invested in coaching, and invite anyone who might not yet be to check it out.
Thank you. For coaches who want to improve their skills, that's definitely something to check out. And I would even take that further and say anyone who is interested in learning about the skills, because the skills are applicable whether a person is a coach or a team
A
member or
leader.
a leader. They're all needed to help whether in a corporate environment or organization or even society at large,
Yeah.
having these skills can elevate the conversation that we're having. So appreciate all the time and thank you again for coming on this podcast.
Yeah. Thank you, Salah. Hope you have a wonderful rest of your day and thank you for having me.
Thank you.